We classify a mass shooting as a single incident where 4 or more people are shot. Many of these incidents weren't widely covered, so the amount of information we can report will vary broadly. Welcome to Missouri, also known as the Show Me State. We're heading to St. Louis, which has a population of just over 300,000. At 12:18 a.m., police responded to the 3000 block of Jefferson Avenue, where they found the bodies of Shamar Carnell, 24, and Karma Richmond, 23, inside a car. Both had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. The body of DeAndre Davis, 21, was discovered around the corner on Indiana Avenue. Officers also found a 22-year-old man suffering from gunshot wounds. He was taken to a nearby hospital and survived. A 26-year-old man who had a gunshot wound to his foot was also taken to a hospital. His injuries were not life-threatening. 3 guns and multiple shell casings were recovered from the scene. The incident started in an apartment that had been rented out for a New Year's Eve party. It spilled outside onto the street, where the shootings then occurred. A spokesperson who confirmed the reservation for the apartment said that it was an unauthorized party, as the person in charge of the property had banned parties from taking place there. Residents in the neighborhood were left stunned by the horrific shooting. The person or persons responsible for this shooting have not been arrested. It's shocking to see how little information is out there about some of these incidents. This is why we decided to start this channel. There were 5 different shooting incidents in the first 3 hours of 2020 in St. Louis alone. This puts into perspective the amount of gun violence that is occurring in the United States. Only one of those incidents falls into our definition of a mass shooting, which is why the others are not being reported here. Over to West Virginia now, also known as the Mountain State. This incident took place in Huntington, which has a population of just over 45,000. On January 1st, 2020, dozens of people were celebrating New Year's at the Culture Hookah Bar at 1113 4th Avenue. An altercation took place, and a man was ejected from the premises. Shortly after this, the man returned armed with a pistol and fired through the front door. He then fled from the scene. 7 partygoers inside the bar were struck by the bullets. Screaming was heard as people tried to flee the area. When police arrived, there were still around 50 people inside. Upon entering the bar, officers were met with a chaotic scene, but quickly gave help to the wounded and secured the area. Many shell casings were taken into evidence. All 7 of the injured people were transported to hospital, 2 of whom were in critical condition. A witness inside the bar said that while he was running out the back door, 2 people were shot behind him. Thankfully, all 7 victims survived. The bar did not have appropriate licenses to operate when the event took place and subsequently closed down. Kaimoni Davis, 33, was arrested a few months later after surveillance footage and witness statements helped to identify him as the suspect. He was arrested in Michigan and returned to West Virginia. Davis had prior felony convictions in Michigan in 2018 for uttering and publishing under false pretenses with intent to defraud, as well as convictions from Michigan from 2019 for delivering a check without an account. He also had active warrants for burglary and domestic battery in Huntington and was wanted for fraud in Illinois. Davis was charged with being a felon in possession of a firearm and 7 state-level counts of wanton endangerment and 7 counts of malicious wounding. Davis admitted to shooting into the bar using a Ruger P95 9mm. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. The third mass shooting for today's episode happened in the Buckeye State, or Ohio, in the city of Cleveland, which has a population of just over 360,000. On January 1st, 2020, shortly after midnight, people were celebrating New Year's in the Medusa Club, which was packed, when a fight broke out in the VIP lounge. The Medusa Club is a popular downtown spot and is a draw for rappers and professional athletes. Witnesses saw a couple of men fighting before shots were fired. Several people were shot. A 24-year-old man was shot in the right side and right arm. A 25-year-old man was shot on his right foot. A 25-year-old woman was struck in her left foot as she was walking to the bathroom. The gunman then ran outside and shot a 30-year-old man in the face at close range. The man told police that he did not recognize the shooter. Thankfully, he and all the other victims survived. Surveillance footage showed a man with a handgun fire off several rounds. Jerron Hurd, 26, was arrested and charged with felonious assault for the incident. Hurd previously spent 4 years in prison after a 2012 armed robbery, in which he fired gunshots at a man and woman and stole a cell phone, glasses, and keys. Hurd was also convicted in 2016 for possessing a weapon despite having a prior felony conviction and carrying a concealed weapon. Officers in that case found him hiding in the backseat of a car with a gun nearby after someone reported hearing 10 gunshots in the area. He was sentenced to 1 year on probation. We were unable to find details of his sentencing for the Medusa Club shooting. Our fourth mass shooting happened on Thursday, January 2nd, 2020, in the Empire State, or New York. This shooting took place in Brooklyn, which has a population of 2.68 million. Early in the evening, inside a building on 62nd Street, between 2nd and 3rd Avenues, 2 men and 1 woman were at the location to buy pot from another man. The group consisted of a boyfriend, a girlfriend, and the boyfriend's friend. The boyfriend got into an argument with the dealer. The dealer then pulled out a gun and shot the girlfriend in the leg and left the scene. The two men took the woman, 23, to Maimonides Medical Center, where they were able to treat her wound. After dropping her off at the hospital, the two men returned to the location of the shooting to look for the gunman. Back on 62nd Street, at the location of Iglesia Sol de Justicia Church, there was a group of people hanging out. The two men thought that a man in that group was either the shooter or part of the shooter's group, and opened fire. A 37-year-old man was hit in the arm. A 24-year-old man was shot in his stomach and right leg, and a 42-year-old man was shot in his leg. At around 8:11 p.m., police responded to the scene and discovered the people who had been injured. All three victims were transported by ambulance to NYU Langone Hospital in Brooklyn. Thankfully, none of the victims' injuries were life-threatening. A witness to the incident, Kwang Cheng, 53, was sitting on a stoop nearby when he heard the shots. He said, "At first I thought they were fireworks, but there were two people on the ground. One was shot in the arm and the other was on the ground. I tried to help one of them tie off his arm. They were screaming for help." At 7:30 a.m. the next day, police identified a man as the alleged shooter and placed him into custody. But this man was the boyfriend of the woman who had been shot first. He was not the shooter. Police said they know who the shooter is and they are confident they will arrest him. No further information has been found on the progress of this case. The fifth mass shooting for today's episode happened on Saturday, January 4th, in Ocala, Florida, otherwise known as the Sunshine State. Ocala has a population of just under 63,000. At around 10:25 a.m., police received a 911 call about a shooting that had occurred on the 800 block of Northwest 6th Terrace. The caller said, "He's been shot. I can't tell you where he's been shot. All I see is blood." On arriving at the scene, police discovered a man with multiple gunshot wounds being given CPR by his sister. They immediately started giving him medical treatment. Witnesses in the crowd pointed out others who had been shot. Officers started treating two more victims, and all three were transported by emergency medical services to Ocala Regional Medical Center. A fourth victim, who wasn't on scene when the officers arrived, had been transported to an area hospital by a friend or family member. The hospital was locked down for a brief time for safety reasons due to the violent circumstances surrounding the shooting. Courtney Carpenter, 19, was shot in the chest and arm. Jason Rackard, 44, was shot in his arm. Caden Johnson, 18, had a gunshot wound to his neck. Thankfully, all three of these victims survived. Courtney Graham Sr., 45, who was the man first to be discovered on scene by the officers, sadly had succumbed to his injuries at the hospital. He left behind a wife and 6 children. The shooting resulted from a dispute between neighbors over a vehicle belonging to Graham's sister that had been torched earlier on in the day. The police also responded to this earlier incident. One of the victims of the shooting said, A man, his brother, and another man, all of whom had guns, were arguing about the car when someone said, "They aren't going to shoot us." The victim said all three of the gunmen then opened fire, striking the four victims. Officers recovered 2 firearms during their investigation. One of the guns was found in a vehicle used to drop one of the victims at the hospital. Multiple casings were also recovered from the scene. Prosecutors decided not to charge anyone over the incident. Assistant State Attorney Amy Berndt said, "Based on conflicting witness testimony and the physical evidence, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to prove beyond a reasonable doubt which group of individuals fired or shot who." Berndt then said, "Even if one could prove which individual shot and killed Courtney Graham, the shooter would have a claim of self-defense that could not be disproved." The 6th mass shooting happened on Sunday, January 5th, 2020, in the Peach State, otherwise known as Georgia. We've traveled to Atlanta, which has a population of just over 510,000. Let's zoom in to the 1000 block of Brady Avenue. At around 2:50 a.m., just outside the Compound nightclub, gunfire erupted. The shots were heard by 2 off-duty police officers who quickly rushed to the scene. Upon arriving, the officers discovered 2 women with gunshot wounds, one to the hand and one to the leg. Both victims were transported to Emory Hospital, where they remained in stable condition. Luckily, both of these victims made a full recovery. Officers also saw a man who appeared to have been shot. However, he left before speaking with investigators. 2 men later arrived at Emory Hospital with gunshot wounds. They said that they had been shot during the incident that took place outside the Compound nightclub. Thankfully, these 2 men also survived. The shooting occurred after a group of people had been involved in a fight at the nightclub. One of the men in the fight left and said he was going to get a gun. Shortly after, he returned and fired multiple shots into a crowd at the location, hitting the 4 people. Only one of the injured people had actually been involved in the argument. There have been no arrests made in relation to this incident. Atlanta police offered a reward of up to $2,000 for any information leading to the arrest and indictment of the suspect in this case. The 7th mass shooting happened on Wednesday, January 8th, 2020, in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, also called the Magnolia State. Bay St. Louis has a population of just over 10,500. After 8 p.m., police responded to a report of shots fired in the parking lot near the back of the Bay Park Apartments, 10 Bay Park Way off Longfellow Drive. On arriving at the scene, officers found 3 victims: Cheyenne Schultz Cardinale, 19, Morgan Landry, 23, and Andrew Rogers, 22, all suffering from gunshot wounds. A fourth victim, Sydney Foster, 24, was found in a vehicle in the complex after yelling for help. Cheyenne was airlifted to Osher Medical Center, Hancock. Sadly, she was confirmed dead. Morgan was transported to University of New Orleans Medical Center, where he unfortunately succumbed to his injuries the next day. Andrew and Sydney were both transported to Memorial Hospital at Gulfport. Andrew was in critical condition. Thankfully, though, they both survived. Police Chief Gary Ponthio said during a news conference that the incident appears to have been a random act of violence. Shortly after the incident, Jason Mitchell, 23, was identified as the shooter after his mother called law enforcement, saying he had a shotgun and was covered in blood. Jason Mitchell took a shotgun from a relative's apartment shortly after 8 p.m. He then proceeded to ambush Cheyenne, Morgan, and Andrew, who were getting into a car. The relative of Mitchell at the apartment was apparently unaware that he had taken the shotgun or that he had any plans for a carjacking. A witness at the scene described how the woman and one of the men in the passenger side of the car were shot before he watched the shooter walk around to the driver's side, shoot the other man in the head, then pull him out and try to steal the car. The witness then described how the shooter ended up taking another car instead and driving away in Landry's Pontiac Grand Prix. Jason Mitchell then drove to Keith's Superstore at Highway 603 and Kiln Waveland Cutoff Road, where he approached a man pumping gas into his white Chevrolet Silverado pickup truck with his partner inside the vehicle. He held a gun to the man's head and demanded he give him the vehicle, then drove away in it without further incident. The couple were unharmed. Deputies were en route to respond to the carjacking at Keith's Superstore when Mitchell's mom called the sheriff's office to report her son. When deputies arrived at the Bayside Park home, they found the truck stolen from Keith's Superstore in a ditch at the front of the property at West Itawamba Street. Jason Mitchell was arrested at the scene. The silver Pontiac Grand Prix that had been stolen from the Bay Park Apartments was found near the dumpster at Keith's Superstore. Mitchell was taken to Hancock County Jail and charged with murder, attempted murder, aggravated assault, carjacking, and possession of a weapon by a convicted felon. He was held on a $3.6 million bond. He had a previous felony conviction for burglary and was ineligible for release due to being on parole. A handgun was seized during the arrest along with the shotgun that had been used in the shooting. Andrew Rogers recovered from his injuries after nearly losing his life in the incident. Cheyenne was his girlfriend, who he referred to as the love of his life. They were at the apartments to visit their friend Morgan. Andrew said, "We were going to see Morgan. We pulled in here and we'd been there thousands of times, so we didn't really think much of it. We just went there, pulled up, and all I remember is the glass breaking, this bright light, and then I smelled the gun smoke. That's what triggered me. I was like, 'Baby, you need to get out.' I looked at her and was like, 'Baby, you need to get out and run.'" Andrew was shot in his back and arm. Then he noticed Cheyenne lying on the ground, bleeding. Andrew also said, "Next thing I know, I hear the sirens and my breathing was getting heavy and I felt like I was going to pass out. I walked to the middle of the little road and laid there. That's when everything started hitting. That's when the pain started hitting me. The whole time I was like, is she going to be okay?" He hopes that people remember Cheyenne as the amazing, big-hearted person she was, saying, "As bad as it sucks, I live with it every day. It plays over and over again every day in my head. I want people to know who she is. I want her to be remembered for who she was. You know, that exciting, energetic person with those beautiful green eyes. That's how she deserves to be remembered." Cheyenne's mother, Melissa Cardinale, remembers her spreading her infectious smile and laughter to everyone she met, a very happy person. Melissa said, "Her whole life, everybody always talked about how if they were in a bad mood, they can't be in a bad mood around her because she's gonna make you laugh. That's just who she was." Cheyenne's closeness with her father earned her the title of Daddy's Girl. Melissa recalls her sitting on the arm of the recliner just to be next to him. On receiving the news about the shooting, she said, "I was completely lost because, I'm going, okay, this is not my daughter. This can't be her." It was very emotional and all, but we just could not believe it. Melissa also said, "Right now it's hard. There's anger and definitely bitterness, but we'll get there." Cheyenne was a forgiving person, and she wouldn't want us to be angry at him. Morgan Landry's older brother, Chris, said, "I half expected him while in the hospital to just jump up and say, 'Gotcha.' I said, 'Come on, man, this has to be a joke.'" Chris also said, "Morgan knew everyone. He never met a stranger. Everyone loved him. If they didn't have common ground, he would get them interested in something and make a common ground. I hate that he's gone. The world's a little bit dimmer without him." Management and staff at the Waveland Waffle House, where Morgan had been head chef, hosted a memorial for friends and family of Morgan and Cheyenne to honor their life. In the crowded car park, mourners held a candlelit vigil. We could not find any details on the sentence Jason Mitchell received, so it's likely that his case has not gone to court yet.
Good boy.